decided to get into sim racing, and this is how it's going so far. I've always loved going fast. I even tried to get into racing as a kid. I used to go to my local karting track every single Sunday after I finished my paper round. There's just something about the thrill of speed and that precision it takes to master a corner that drew me toward the world of racing from a very young age. Unfortunately, racing isn't cheap, and I didn't come from a wealthy family that could buy my way into Formula One. Although I never raced professionally, I did end up surrounding myself with speed in other ways. Over the years, I've had quite a few fast cars, and I've taken them to the track whenever I've had the chance. I also have a passion for motorcycles and love the odd brisk ride on private roads. In the last year, I plan to spend a lot more time at the track on my bike. Although not cheap, it would be far easier on my wallet than taking my car to the track every weekend. However, much like many things in life, that didn't quite go to plan. Unfortunately, I had a pretty severe accident in the desert whilst riding motocross, which put that plan immediately on the back burner.
That's because you're an idiot.
I've been away from my bike for nearly a year with a back injury, when I decided it was probably time to let it go. Although I could ride, it wasn't the same anymore. I no longer have the strength in my back for long rides, and definitely not for fast lap times. So that brings us to today. Sim racing seemed like the perfect way to combine my passion for driving with a new challenge. I spent months diving into every detail of sim racing. I watched countless reviews, tutorials and hardware comparisons to figure out what setup would be best for me. From the wheelbase and pedals, to the monitors and the seat, every choice felt like a big decision. After finally finalising my list, the waiting game began. It felt like an eternity before everything finally arrived, and when it did, I faced a whole new challenge: putting it together. I took my time and tried my best to enjoy the process. There were a lot of issues to work around, and I had to take a lot of breaks to rest my back, but finally it was built, and she's absolutely beautiful. I set up my rig, booted up iRacing, and thought, how hard could it be? Spoiler alert, it's definitely harder than it looks. In my first few practice sessions, I realised that sim racing brings its own unique challenges compared to real-world driving. Adapting to the nuances of the virtual tracks, the sensitivity of the hardware, and understanding how the simulation responds to inputs. It was a completely different set of skills. Even though I'm no stranger to racing techniques, it took time to translate what little skills I do have to the sim environment. My first few laps, they were a mix of figuring out the software, adjusting the force feedback, and dialing in my setup rather than worrying about any lap times. But I stuck with it, and after a lot of practice, a few virtual spins and qualifying in third place, I finally entered my first ever sim race. Strangely enough, the nerves were real. That caught me off guard slightly because at the end of the day, this is just a game. There are no real stakes, no physical danger, and no expensive repair bills if I, inevitably mess it up. Yet, sitting in my rig, seeing the countdown, it was a surreal blend of excitement and pressure. The second we hit T1, the carnage began. The last thing I wanted to do was spin out on cold tyres, so I was a little sedate trying to get to the second apex. I was trying to avoid mistakes, being shunted from behind, and definitely wasn't expecting cars flying overhead. As lucky as I was, especially managing to ghost my way through the front of that stuntman's car, I was still down to P5 and I was hoping to at least claw back the 2 places I'd lost. Therein, the race wasn't anywhere near as intense. I found my, albeit relaxed pace quite quickly. There were no particular dramatic moments, but I think we'd already accomplished raising the heart rate quite enough on that first turn. At the start of lap 3, you can see the opposition fighting a little too hard for that 3rd place spot, outbraking themselves and pushing each other wide of T1. This allowed me to get a nice flow around the next section of track and close in on them slightly. I wanted to be close enough that after that last corner, which I had practiced quite a lot, I would get a nice run onto the straight with draft and be in a position to overtake. As you can see, I pushed that a little too hard and nearly had a brown seat moment of my own. As we progress through the race, I'm trying to put pressure on the driver in front. I hope that by me showing myself in the side mirror that he takes his eyes off the road and makes a mistake. Although this didn't seem to have a huge impact or give me the opportunity for a direct overtake, I did manage to keep close enough to pick up a draft down the straight and make a nice pass on the brakes into T1. Lo and behold, this ended up being a preferred method of overtake because on the next lap, exactly the same thing. Unfortunately, I wasn't the only one trying to pull off this absolutely world-class technique because the number 9 car tried to dish out some of my own medicine the very next go around. Fortunately, I managed to stick on the outside of the track without putting myself in the grass, ready to try and hold onto the inside line of the very next corner. That worked nicely. At this point, I didn't want to push too hard, because the thought of getting a podium in my very first race way outweighed the idea of risking it all to secure a higher position. I survived a T1 pile-up, and I'm still exactly where I qualified, 3rd place. A pretty respectable podium in my first ever race. I'm happy with that, all things considered. But what about a little Brucey bonus? Did you see what happened back there? The number 5 car has managed to spin out on the last lap. They must be absolutely kicking themselves. I was a little bit concerned about the rejoin, but thankfully he pulled back at the last second. What a drive! All I can say is this: sim racing is a whole new level of fun and challenge, and I am absolutely hooked. It's given me even more incentive to go back to fighting fit and back on track. Hopefully you'll come along too. Stick around to see my journey from a total rookie to, hopefully, something better. If you're into sim racing, cars, motorsport, or just love a good underdog story, hit that subscribe button and join me for the ride. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.